Hey guys, welcome to Coding with NJ. In this tutorial, we are going to learn about something which should have been very trivial, but it's not. Yes, I'm talking about being able to include one HTML file into another one to avoid repetition. Now, why this is important? You see, when you are working even on a very basic 3 to 4 page web application, a lot of front end look and feel as well as functionality is common on every page. Take main menu for example. To design even a very basic navigation bar takes a reasonable amount of coding. You have to define HTML for the basic structure, then CSS to give it nice appearance, and finally some JavaScript for dynamic manipulation. Now, if you have to repeat this code on every page, besides defining the functionality of the actual page itself, it's not only unnecessary repetition, but unnecessary versioning of the code as well. But the worst part is, if you have to make some changes in the navigation bar at some later point, and if you miss out even one page, then your web application is broken and inconsistent. So the best way to avoid this hassle is to write once and import or include as many times or at as many places as you like. But unfortunately, HTML does not have this provision natively. So what are we going to do? Luckily, if you are using any framework, then that framework offers this functionality. But what if we are not using any framework, or if you want to know how does any framework make this magically possible? Well, that's what we are going to do together. So before we start coding, let me show you what we are aiming for today. Okay, this is what we are aiming for today. As you can see, it doesn't do much. This web application consists of just 4 pages: home page, then products page, which again doesn't have anything except for some text, then about page, and contact us page. All of those pages contain some text, nothing else, no graphics, no pictures, just some simple text. What is unique about all those pages is that each of these pages share this menu bar. Now normally the piece of code that creates this menu bar has to be copy pasted in all of those 4 pages. But rather, this piece of code has been defined once, and all of these pages are including that code much the same way as Java uses import or PHP uses include. So let's get to it and let's start coding. As always, we are going to start off with an empty folder in our Visual Studio Code. We will be needing one index.html file, so let's create it. We will also need one HTML file for products. Let's name it products.html. Then one for contact us and one for about us. One style file where we'll define our CSS, and one JavaScript file. All of these files are currently empty. We will also need one more file in which we'll put all the code related to the navigation bar. And that code is going to be shared by all of those 4 pages. But we are going to start off with index.html file, and in the beginning we are going to put the code related to the menu bar in the index.html as well. Once we are satisfied with the look and feel of index.html, we will see how can we extract that part of the code into another HTML file and then make the rest of these 4 files, that is index, products, contact, and about files, include that code into their own files. So let's start working on index.html first. Skeleton code. Let's begin by including the CSS file and the JavaScript file. And at the bottom, and it's going to be script.js. Currently both of those files are empty. Now in the body section, we are going to create a navigation element, and let's give it a class name navbar. So within this navigation bar, we are going to define all the logic for our menu bar. But let's keep it empty for the time being, and let's move on to the contents of the page. Now let's define the contents of the page, which I'm going to put in sections. And within this section, let me define a h1 heading, and the heading should be how to include one HTML file into another without any framework or HTML. So that's our heading. Now let's define a paragraph with some lorem ipsum text. Okay, our section is done. Now let's move back to the navigation bar. This navigation bar is going to have 3 children. One is going to represent this logo, second one is going to represent these elements, and the third one is going to represent our sign up and login contents. So for the logo, we are going to define a div. The text of this logo is going to be logo as well, but the image we are going to get it from Font Awesome. So let me sign into my Font Awesome account. Copy the kit link. Let's paste it before style.css file. Okay, now as far the icon that I have used is a meteor icon, so I'm going to, okay, I think I've used this icon. Copy, and let's paste it before the logo text. Let's see how it currently looks in our live server. Okay, this is how it currently looks. Now we should work on generating these links. So After the logo div, now we need unordered list. I'm going to give it a class name menu. And within this unordered list, we are going to have 4 list items. Each one of those is going to contain an anchor tag. So li, then arrow, that means each li is going to have a child, which is going to be an anchor. And because we need 4 such elements, so I've enclosed it within the parenthesis and I'm going to times it with 4. Now we have got 4 list items and each one contains an anchor element. So the first one is going to contain, so let's put the text home in the first one. And when this home is clicked, we are redirected to index.html, which is our home page. The next one contains products. And when this link is clicked, we are redirected to products.html. Likewise, the third one is going to be about us. When clicked, it's going to redirect us to about.html. Last one is contact.html. We need another unordered list for sign in and sign up. And since it's just for decoration purpose, I haven't defined any links or any pages for this one. So I'm going to just define 2 li items. First one is going to be called sign up and second one is login. Because this is a proof of concept project where we want to see how can we include one HTML file into another, so I don't need to have functionality defined for each and every one of them. That reminds me, I must give this unordered list a class name as well, because we have two unordered lists and we are going to refer to them through our JavaScript, so we should have a way to uniquely identify those unordered lists. Therefore, I must give it a class name. Let's call it login menu. Let's have a look in the browser. Okay. So now it consists of 3 parts. The first one is logo, then the actual menu, and then sign up and login part. Now let's start working on its appearance. Let's go to style.css file. And again, we are going to define very minimalistic styling. Let's remove the default margins and paddings from each element. And let's define the box sizing to border box. Then for the body, let's define background image to consist of 2 colors. Therefore, I'm going to go for linear gradient. So the colors that I'm going to use are, so these 2 colors I want to be kind of mixed, and I want this mixing to start from the top and go to the bottom. So the first argument is going to be to bottom. So it starts with one color at the top and then as it goes down, it changes to a different color. Then background attachment, fixed. So this is how it currently looks. As you can see, at the top it has gray shade and as it goes down it gets a slightly yellowish tone. Font family, sans serif. Now let's define some styling for the section. Width is going to be 80% of viewing width. Margin is going to be 5% at the top and bottom, and auto for the left and right so that the contents go to the center. Then for the padding, top 40 pixels, text aligned center, and line height to be 25 pixels. Let's see how it currently looks. So this is how it currently looks. Now we need to put some space between this h1 and the contents of the section. So h1, and let's define margin bottom 20 pixels. Okay, that's better. Now let's work on styling the menu bar. So menu bar starts here, and the reason I am defining the menu bar at the end is that eventually I'm going to remove the code for the menu bar styling from this file and put it into the other file, which is going to be included in the rest of the files. Now since this whole menu is inside the nav element, which has a class name nav bar, so let's define some styling for that first. Let's give it some minimum height. Let's say 10% of viewing height. Then give it a display of flex so that all the elements get in a row. Justify contents. Let's put some space between them. Now let's give it a border bottom, solid 3 pixels, and the color is going to be gray. Box shadow 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 35 pixels for the blur and 2 pixels for the spread. Then the color, let's have a look. Okay, now we need to put some space between the left and right corners by defining some padding. The top and bottom padding is going to be 12 pixels and 28 pixels for the left and right. Now let's give this logo a color so that it matches the theme. For that, we are going to define nav bar and eye element. Let's define a color. Let's make it slightly bigger in size. For that, we have to go back to index.html and we have to give it this eye element another class fa-2 times. So now it's 2 times its original size. Now we need to define display property flex for this unordered list and this unordered list as well. And we have to remove the styling and the decoration as well. But first, let me generally define the font size and font weight. 700 and font size is larger. Align our items center, some space between each letter, 3 pixels. Now let's go down and work on the first unordered list. We gave that unordered list a class called menu. So navbar dot menu. We also need to set the display property flex for the other unordered list as well. Therefore, comma navbar dot login hyphen menu was the name for the class that we gave to the second unordered list. So let's display to fix. Okay, that's it. Now let's remove list style from the unordered list. None. Now let's work on the anchor text inside the first unordered list. Navbar, menu, and anchor. The reason for appending this navbar with each of these elements is that since I'm going to extract this part and put it inside another HTML file, and if this was a fairly large project, then probably one developer was working on the index.html and another on the navigation bar. In that case, there is a possibility that there are other anchor elements or unordered elements inside the index.html, and they might be styled in different ways. So we don't want any clashing in the styles for the elements in the menu bar and for the elements in the index.html. So therefore, we must append this navbar with every element. This way, the styling that is being defined over here is only going to have an effect on the menu bar elements. Okay, so now for the anchor text inside those unordered lists, put some space between each of those elements. So margin right is going to be 38 pixels. Let's remove text decoration so that there is no underline, and let's define a color. Okay, now let's have a look. Okay, we need some space between sign up and login as well. So let's copy, comma, paste, and this is actually login hyphen menu. So I haven't defined anchor for the second one, just the list items. Okay, so this is how it currently looks. Now let's get to the actual part, that is remove all the HTML and the styling which is associated with this menu bar and put it in a separate file. So let's create a separate file. Let's call it navbar.html. Let's go to index, and we want to keep this nav inside the index.html because we will be stitching the contents that we are removing with this nav element. So we need to have an element which we are going to access through JavaScript and stitch these contents back into this element. So I have cut all the elements and now our nav is empty. Let's go to navbar.html and paste everything here. Now let's create a style element and go to the style.css file. So this whole code, this styling, it belongs to navigation bar. So cut it and let's go back to navbar.html and paste it within these style tags. Now let's go back to the browser and see how it currently looks. Okay, now as you can see, there is no sign of any menu bar on our web page because we have moved it to another file. Now we are going to see how can we include that file into our index.html file. For that, we have to go to our script.js file. Since once we somehow get the contents from this navbar.html file, we are going to stitch those contents in the nav element. Therefore, we should have a reference to that element. So let's start with that. And the class name that we gave to that nav element is navbar. Now comes the part where we actually have to get the contents of navbar.html. Therefore, we must have a way through which we can go to the navbar and request whatever is defined inside that file. And one of the ways to send request to another file is through fetch request. So we are trying to communicate with the navbar.html file, which is inside the same folder. Therefore, starting with the slash navbar.html. This fetch request usually consists of second object as well, which is optional, and since we don't need to define anything further, therefore we are skipping the second parameter. The way this fetch usually works is that whatever address you define over here, that is supposed to be our server. So this fetch request goes to that location and tries to communicate with that server. But since in our case it's not a server file, it's simply an HTML file. So when this fetch request reaches that endpoint and realizes it's not a server, so what it will do it's going to copy the contents of this navbar.html and brings it back. And since this fetch request returns us a promise which consists of some kind of a stream, so our first job is to convert this stream into some kind of data which our JavaScript understands. So the response that fetch brings back, let's apply text method on it because we want to convert that stream into text. Then this text again returns us another stream, so we need to call another then block. And this time we have actual data, so we can do anything with that data as we like. And we simply want to stitch that data into our this navbar element. The way to stitch this data into this nav is nav.innerHTML equals this data. So whatever has been brought back from this navbar.html, it has now been stitched into our nav element in the index.html. And this should have made our menu bar reappear in the browser. So let's go and check it out. Okay, so we have got our menu bar back. Now all that is left is that we have to define contents for this products file, about file, and contact us file. So let's go to index.html and copy everything because this is just a proof of concept and it has only, and every page is going to have just lorem ipsum text. So let's copy and paste everything. In order to distinguish between the index.html and the other pages, let's put another section and h2. Let's product in order to distinguish between the two sections. And again, let's define some lorem ipsum text. Copy. Let's go to about.html, paste, and let's change the heading over here from products to about us. Now let's go to contact.html, contact us. Remember, each of these files share the same JavaScript files, so therefore each of those files is going to contain the menu bar as well. Okay, now we are on index.html. Let's click on products.html, about, and contact. Now as you can see, we have just defined the menu bar in one separate file, and through fetch request we have stitched this menu bar into each of these files. This way we don't have to do the repetition. Our navigation related code is in one file, so if you need to change this code after some time, all you need to do, go to that file and make the changes there, and each of these pages will automatically reflect those changes. Okay guys, the logic that we have defined so far works for including HTML as well as CSS files into another HTML file. But what if our HTML file that we are including into another HTML file also had its own JavaScript defined? Well, in that case, in order to stitch that JavaScript file and make it work into index.html file as well, we have to do some further tweaking. It just won't be available as it is in our index.html file. So in order to see how can we stitch JavaScript into index.html and make it work as well, what we are going to do is we are going to define a click event for this home anchor element. So when this home element is clicked, an alert gets displayed which will simply say home has been clicked, and once we click on the OK button on that alert, we get redirected back to index.html. So for example, if we are on the products page and we click on home, first will be shown the alert and then we will be redirected back to index.html. Likewise, if we are on about page or contact page and we click on the home page, again we will be shown that same alert, and once we click on the OK button on the alert, we will be redirected back to index.html. So that's the smallest JavaScript logic we are defining in our navbar.html, and then we will see how can that JavaScript logic still work in the index.html as well. So let's go and first define the event listener for this home element. So let's go back to navbar.html, and at the very end, let's define a skip element. Now since this unordered list consists of multiple list items, so we only are interested in the first one. So for that, document.query selector all, because there are many, query selector all because there are many list items. All of them are inside an unordered list which has a class name menu. So we are saying all the list items which are inside the menu unordered list, select them, and then since we are only interested in the first list item element, so put a square brackets with 0, that is index 0. So now this li references this li element, the first one. Now let's define a click event listener for that li item. Now define arrow function, and within that arrow function, let's prevent the default behavior associated with the anchor tag, which is inside the list item. So we need to pass this E in the arrow function. Let's define an alert, which simply says home clicked. And once we click on the OK button on the alert, we should be redirected back to index.html. So that's the logic associated with the home. Now we need to go back to the script.js file and figure out what changes we need to make there so that this JavaScript portion is not only stitched in our index.html file, but it also works as a JavaScript as well. So let's go to script.js file. So after this line, now what we need to do is that even though we have received just text, so this data basically contains everything which is defined in the navbar.html file as a text, and it has been appended as the inner HTML of this navbar. But now if we want the JavaScript that is defined there to work as well, we have to do some tweaking. So if you have just HTML or CSS, this line will make it work just fine. As you just saw, it not only attached the HTML code, but it also made the styling work as well. But if we have defined JavaScript there, it won't work. So to make it work, we have to create an object of DOM parser. So const parser. This DOM parser is able to convert any string into valid DOM. Then we can attach those DOM nodes into the DOM node of the index.html. And to do that, we need to call a method on this parser, on this DOM parser object, which is parse from string. And it takes two parameters. The first one is going to be the data or contents that we want to parse. That means a string that we want to parse, which is called data in our case. And in the second one, you have to tell what kind of parsing we want to be applied. So we want it to be converted into text HTML. Now let's store the result of this conversion into a variable. Let's call it doc because it contains the whole HTML as a document now. So from this whole document, all we are interested in the script part. So we are going to say doc.query selector, and we want to extract the node which is actually a script, and then we are interested in its text contents. Once we get those text contents, we are going to pass those text contents into a method called eval. So this eval, whatever has been passed to this eval method, if that is JavaScript contents, then this eval method is going to execute those contents. So this way, our JavaScript will be executed as well. Now let's go and check out if that works. So let's click on the home. We are on index.html page, and let's click on home. We got an alert. Now the moment we click on this OK button, we will again be redirected back to index.html. Since we are already on the index.html page, you might not notice it, but this should also work for other pages as well. So now let's go to products page. Now as you can see, we are on the products page because we can see second paragraph as well. Now we are on the products.html page, and let's click on the home page. Now we are still on the products.html page. When we click on OK, then we got redirected back to index.html. So let's check out our about page. Click on home, OK, and redirected. Now go to contact page. Click on home, OK, and redirected. Okay, so that was all the aim of today's tutorial. I hope you learned and liked it. If you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you so much.